Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to THDA's Chart Dive series, where we dive right into the charts of famous people you might know to understand why they are the way that they are and to give you insights about the human design chart in action. Today, we're going to be investigating the chart of one of the most wealthy and successful men of our time, who's been in the spotlight for the unconventional names of his two children, and who also has his fair share of critics for his use of resources towards space exploration on Mars. And this person is Elon Musk. So before we get into this video, I just want to quickly mention and thank today's sponsor, Bodygraph Chart, which is a multi-purpose platform for human design readers and professionals that allows you to do so many neat things for your business, like integrate a chart generator onto your website, create custom auto-generated human design reports for your clients, and also generate and save your library of human design charts that you can use in readings, in videos, and so much more. And this is actually what we're going to be using today. And don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can continue to satisfy your human design curiosity and be the first to know when we release fresh content here at the Human Design Academy. For those of you who are new here, I'm your host, Crystal Alferrero. I'm a human design teacher and guide, and I help people like yourselves make sense of the human design system. So if you're ready to dive into Elon's chart, let's go. All right, so here we have Elon Musk, who was born on June 28th, 1971 in Pretoria, South Africa. He's a 3-5 sacral MG on the right angle cross of service. And he's someone that's known for being, the CEO of Tesla, SpaceX, and now the owner of Twitter, which is now called X, actually, which I just found out recently. And being an MG, he's very energetic by nature. But specifically when he's building and studying and creating the things that lights him up and brings him a sense of satisfaction. Otherwise, he can find himself burnt out and frustrated. And so this is exactly what we've witnessed him do over his, career. Follow the things that simply bring him a sense of satisfaction. When he was younger, in an interview, he mentioned that, not when he was younger, but sorry, in an interview, he mentioned that he got into computer programming and coding from a young age, not because it was part of this big agenda or any kind of plan, but simply because he loved playing video games, right? He played a lot of video games and it became his escape from a difficult home life, a difficult school life. And so from a young age, he was following that gut response. He was following that satisfaction to pave his path. And, his chart tells us that he has the design of someone who's very busy, has this incredible work ethic, and he's charismatic in his own way, of course. And we see this through his channel 2034. It's the channel of charisma. It's the design of a pure manifesting generator where as soon as it becomes clear that he wants to do something, in other words, it's in response, it brings him satisfaction, he's lit up by this thing, he maybe feel pulled by this expansive energy. He generates this expansive energy to jump straight into action on these ideas or desires right away. It's called a design where awareness becomes deed. As soon as you become aware of it, you want to make it happen. And so again, it's also no surprise that he's CEO of not just one, but two currently large businesses, multi-billion-dollar businesses being SpaceX and Tesla. And he's also recently purchased Twitter in 2022. So he's got a lot of different interests and projects going on simultaneously, which is one of the kind of like hallmark traits, being multi-passionate, having multiple interests. And it doesn't look like he's slowing down anytime soon, right? He is, instead of, there might be this narrative out there that tells him to just choose one thing or to just focus on this one thing. But no, he followed his satisfaction and instead created these two, or at least was part of creating these two multi-billion-dollar businesses, right? And we also see that he has a design of determination in his chart with the channel 52.9, and this is also called the channel of concentration. And it specifically relates to, the energy and the determination to focus and concentrate on whatever project he's immersing himself in at the time, right? Particularly when it's something that brings him satisfaction. If he tries to focus on something that he doesn't give a crap about, it will be very difficult to focus and concentrate. It's through this response when he's actually, listening to what's bringing him that satisfaction that it turns on and it gives him the fuel and the power to focus and concentrate on what matters. And so this is the gift that has helped him not only become a very, very skilled programmer and engineer from the start, but has also helped him focus on building and creating, again, these multi-billion-dollar businesses like Tesla, like SpaceX. Of course, it's not the ability to concentrate on its own that helped him pave his way to success, but I can see this also being his gift of being able to correct and improve things through his channel 1858, which is the channel of judgment. It's a design of insatiability, and particularly it's someone who has this, gifted awareness or this critical eye of what needs to be improved and an insatiable drive to make these corrections. There's always something more that can be done, right? Both of these, the 18 and the 58, are activated by Earth on the conscious and the unconscious side, as we see. So, striving for continuous improvement is what brings him a sense of grounding and stability and balance in the work that he does, right? There's a lot of criticism that he gets for just being way out there. And I'm sure a lot of the ideas that he's had are unlike anything that his team, his employees have seen. It might bring investors a sense of discomfort, but it's through his awareness of how to make things better and his ability to actually do that and implement it and put it into place, especially with that gate 48, the gate of depth. He's not only aware of what can be improved, but he has the ability to offer depth of solutions for how to make things better. And this is how he gains a lot of that investor confidence. And again, it's through his own sense of grounding and stability, through the improvements that he's able to make and the critical eye and awareness that he has, that, this kind of reflects back into how he's perceived by other people that might be investing in him as well, right? And also people in his business. All right. And so also in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, he was quoted as saying, I have OCD on product related issues. I always see what's wrong. Would you want that? When I see a car or a rocket or a spaceship, I see only what's wrong. I never see what's right. It's not a recipe for happiness. Nothing you ever do will be good enough. So you will have to find your own value, not depending on the praise to get you through your obviously insufficient 80-hour work weeks, right? So just in saying that, in this particular quote, what I get from this and what I see from this is that it demonstrates perfectly both the gift and the challenge of this channel of judgment, the 1858. It's this gift of being able to spot and see what can be improved and always just being critical of things naturally, right? But at the same time, struggle with this insatiable feeling that there's always something more that can be done and that what you're doing is never enough, right? So at the same time, as he says that, I love how he's also demonstrated how much he's learned around the importance of finding that intrinsic value and joy within himself to keep going rather than rely on striving for this idea of perfection or, striving to get this external praise as a source of joy and happiness, right? A lot of wisdom that we see here. And with his gate 38, we see that in the root center, right? The gate of the fighter, and also the gate 49 with the gate of principles in the emotional center. This gives him that consistent fuel to fight for meaning and purpose in alignment with his principles in order to bring about this revolutionary change, that capacity, that potential to bring about revolutionary change. And we see both of these activations, the gate 38 and the gate 39, activated by Mars, which represents the quality of the energy he brings to the table when it comes to taking initiative, when it comes to taking action, and when it comes to acting on desires. It represents his energy dynamic. And when there's something that he truly wants, you know, from these energies, you can guarantee that he'll fight to make it happen. And in another interview, he said something that perfectly describes the energy of the Gate 38.
When something is important enough, you do it even though the odds are not in your favor.
And aside from his fighter energy, he's known as someone who's unconventional, adventurous, and in constant experimentation and in, this discovery mode, basically, which is the perfect depiction of the martyr heretic profile, the 3-5 profile. And this is what's helped him become a very successful businessman, right? It's the experimental nature that made him a pioneer in his respective fields because he's always pushing the envelope to see what works and what doesn't. He's investing billions of dollars in space exploration on Mars, doing things that, other people wouldn't do in order to achieve these big dreams and desires that he has, in order to, discover again what other people haven't discovered before. And specifically when it comes to space exploration on Mars, he has this big hope of colonizing the planet basically, and essentially sustaining human life outside of Earth. Again, I'm not going to comment on that, but those are big dreams, and who knows where that might take humanity, what benefits might come from that. Again, that's outside of my scope, so I'm not going to comment on that. But anyways, moving away from his career, which we obviously see is very successful, right? Elon is seen as one of the most brilliant and successful people in the world, and there are so many people who aspire to be him or to follow in his footsteps. But as we all know, every human has their own set of problems and their own set of challenges that they face behind the scenes. And so when we actually look at his early life, Elon actually experienced bullying at school and, physical and emotional abuse at the hands of his father, whose name's Elon Musk. And I think they are currently estranged. Makes a lot of sense. But anyways, he stated in an interview referring to his father, he was such a terrible human being. My dad will have a carefully thought out plan of evil. He will plan evil. I think you can actually, there's a documentary that you can watch. There's a couple of really good ones on YouTube. I'm going to link them down below as well. But he did not speak about his father in this good light, right? He was basically like emotionally and physically abused by this man. And so looking at his chart, he has an undefined heart, Elon. And so people with undefined hearts can spend a lot of time navigating these feelings of unworthiness or feeling undervalued, which can manifest as either imposter syndrome and not pursuing what you truly want in life, or even, spending a shit ton of energy, excuse my language, on trying to prove themselves, right?
I don't ever give up. I mean, I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated.
I'm saying this from experience. I have a completely open heart, and I have gone through that, I'm going to say that phase of spending a lot of energy, and even, now sometimes catching myself in these situations where, okay, why am I trying to prove myself? Who am I trying to prove myself to? But anyways, that's the nature of having this undefined heart. And so I can see the challenges of this undefined heart really challenging him at the beginning, and being in an unsupportive school environment and also an unsupportive home environment, he must have really felt the brunt of that. But at the same time, I feel like this is what initially propelled him and motivated towards the success now as possible, right? At the same time, I also feel like he's demonstrated a lot of maturity over the years to move beyond, just proving himself as that primary motivator. And finding that intrinsic value within himself. So going back to that quote when he says, nothing you ever do will be good enough. You have to find your own value, not depending on praise to get you through your 80-hour work week. And so we can see the wisdom that he's learned over the years in finding that intrinsic value rather than depending on praise or relying on the words of others. And I feel like back as a child, I think he had a really close relationship with his mother as well, who did provide him with that support. But even from an early age, he kind of discovered that he couldn't rely on the external praise of, let's say, his father, for example, or his peers in his school, and really had to dig deep to find that worthiness within himself. And this is the wisdom and the highest expression of the undefined heart, not proving themselves, doing something because it matters to you, um, and not relying on this willpower, on this need to push through and to prove yourself, right? In order to find your satisfaction, or in order to live and experience satisfaction in your life, right? And shifting the conversation from his early life, I wanted to get into more of his romantic relationships and look at his life from the lens of love and romance. And so he does have a pretty interesting dating history and relationship history, which also I did not know about until very recently. He's been married and divorced 3 times. He has 10 children. And you also may see him in the headlines every so often with a new celebrity romance, one of them being Amber Heard in 2017. So that's why it was really surprising for me to find out that he was actually married a couple times and has 10 children. I actually only thought he had the children with Grimes, the Canadian singer, because of the name headlines, the strange names. I don't even know how to say them, so I'm not gonna go into that. But anyways, I thought he was a bachelor, and I thought he was just whatever. And so it was a surprise for me. But looking at it from a human design perspective, it makes a lot of sense, right? There's two things that I noticed right away: his G center and the line 3 in his profile. So, of course, the G center in general, it's the center of identity, love, and direction. And for Elon, it's undefined. And he also has no love gates activated. So, on one hand, he's very adaptable and, may have different ways of expressing his identity, expressing love, and this is basically what allows him to attract and connect with different people, with people from many different backgrounds and many different walks of life. And right away, you see that in just like the different partners he's attracted from his first wife, which is Justine Wilson, who he met at Queen's. It's his university sweetheart. They have, I believe, 5 children together. But, anyways, she's a writer, she's more academic, right? And when you compare that to his last ex wife, her name is Grimes. I forget what her full real name is, but she's known as Grimes, and she is a musician, and she's known to be very unconventional in who she is and her beliefs, and etc. Right? And so, yeah, you can see just like the way he's able to adapt to different people that he attracts in his life, and sometimes maybe even become them in that relationship. Um, and as long as that feels good for him, then who's to say what's right or wrong? You're here to sample and um, experience many different types of relationships possibly in this lifetime. And an undefined G center also, again, has this possible fixation with finding love or even holding on to love with people who may not be the best match. And along with the line 3, again, that line 3 martyr, this tells us about his bonding strategy. And so his bonding strategy is bonds made and broken. And we can see, someone with this particular configuration, the undefined G center and the line 3 in his profile, as someone who can have many different partners in their lifetime because they can not only be obsessed with finding love and maybe falling in love fast, but once they realize that a relationship or a bond that they've made isn't working for them, they'll break it and they'll move on. And then that process repeats. So in Elon's life, this shows through the multiple marriages and partners over the years. So it's really important for Elon to learn to enter the right relationships correctly, which basically just means, listen to your gut before making a big commitment, rather than maybe initiating from this place of maybe the fear and urgency to find love or to be loved and accepted, right? Because when it's undefined, it can be very helpful for him to also take the time to feel out the environment that's created with a new partner, since undefined Gs are even more sensitive to their environment, since that's where they find the right love and direction. So, does this partner contribute to creating a positive, satisfying, and loving environment? Or does this partnership result in more frustration? Does it cause you to feel suffocated? But, anyways, let's say that, okay, he's entered a relationship correctly. It's also it's also possible that previous relationship troubles that he might have had could have been attributed to his undefined emotional center. And so, going to the undefined emotional center, these are people who are open and receptive to the emotions of others. So many people with this configuration may develop a coping strategy of avoiding truth and confrontation in order to avoid the negative reactions of others, in order to avoid maybe the discomfort that can come with communicating your feelings, communicating your needs, or maybe setting certain boundaries. And so this might result in him repressing feelings and maybe not communicating about important issues until it's too late, or until the undefined emotional center has this outburst. It eventually has this outburst, right? All that emotion, all that repressed feelings, it builds up, it creates baggage. And so these outbursts can lead undefined emotional centers to be either extremely reactive to the discomfort. And, specifically when we look at his gate 49 in that undefined emotional center, it can maybe cause him to cut off relationships prematurely, or even say things that he later regrets in order to protect himself. Or even with the gate 38, right? The gate of the fighter, maybe not being wise about picking your battles, and just, he might find himself in this cycle of feeling emotionally exhausted and frustrated when he's constantly feeling like he needs to fight for certain things, right? Reactive, especially after the honeymoon phase, right? And we all know that communication is the key to healthy and satisfying relationships. So the key to Elon finding a long-lasting, satisfying partnership that, is fulfilling for him, is for him to make sure that, number one, he's entering relationships correctly by trusting his gut, right? Listening to what his body is telling him rather than listening to any noise and maybe the opinions of others that might confuse him, that might come in through that open head and ajna, thinking about a lot of things, especially the open head. But basically thinking about a bunch of things that don't matter, right? So trusting his gut as that primary source of whether to enter a relationship or stay in a relationship. And then secondly, keeping that open line of communication. In other words, discerning, which battles to confront, when to let go. And if you are going to, fight for something, or if there is a certain battle that's right for you to get into, to communicate that consistently so that he doesn't find himself in possible situations or positions that he's going to like outburst and, maybe say things that he regrets down the line and react in a way that he later regrets. That creates more frustration, right? So that is the key. And so, moving on to his life's work, in other words, his incarnation cross, we can see that he is born on the right angle cross of service. So, he has his conscious sun in Earth in gate 52 and 58, and has his unconscious sun in Earth in gate 17 and gate 18. He's also a 3-5 profile. And so, in other words, his life's work is to be of service and to bring about improvement in the lives of others.
What gives you satisfaction?
Doing something useful for other people that I like doing.
I feel like it's a straightforward incarnation cross. It's the right angle cross of service. Obviously, service is going to have to do with that. So just remember as well that your life's work unravels as you're following your personal authority and you're living out your truth. So, in Elon's case, we've seen that from such a young age. He's gone to the beat of his own drum. He, at least from what we know and from what I've seen in my personal perspective of him, he seems like he's someone that never really had this big personal agenda for him to necessarily be in the spotlight, but he simply followed what his body was responding to and follows what brings him satisfaction at the time. And by trusting this inner voice, he has done things that no one else has done. He's brought about improvements to the world by embracing mistakes and lessons through his trial and error process to discover what no one else has discovered before as that line 3 martyr. And he's also made that large scale influence and change through his unconventional and practical solutions as a line 5 heretic, right? And with his conscious son in the quarter of civilization, this purpose that he has, this cross of service, is manifested through manifesting spirit into form, right? In other words, he fulfills his purpose through building structures that support the well-being of humanity. And we can see this through his improvement he brought to electric cars through Tesla, right? They don't need to, I think there was this common belief that electric cars were like uglier, bulkier, etc., right? And he brought improvements to debunk that, to make electric cars that were stylish, that were looked nice, that were also lighter as well, right? And so that's just one of the examples. He also brought about improvements to rockets through making reusable rockets under SpaceX. And also perhaps one day in the future, we might see new structures built on Mars to sustain human life. So that's it for today's chart dive. And if you want to learn how to read and analyze the human design chart, just like we did today, and maybe you want to add it to your skill set as a coach or a service provider, or even start a meaningful career or business in human design, this is exactly what I train my students to do inside THDA's Reader Certification Program. We go beyond the information that you're learning about on this channel and actually help you build the confidence and the skills to analyze, to synthesize, and to apply and deliver human design in the most empowering way possible, and especially in an incredibly supportive community. So if this is something that feels aligned and correct for you, I invite you to click the link in the description down below to learn more, or even to enroll right now and get started right away. Anyways, if you like these types of videos, I'd be so grateful if you could let me know by hitting that like button and hitting subscribe to see more chart dives like this one. So with that said, have an amazing day or evening, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.